Chosen ones, there comes a moment when heaven stops whispering and starts pressing, and the pressure you have been feeling is not punishment. It is a holy summons that has been following you through every silence, every delay, every night you wondered why your life felt suspended between what broke you and what has not yet arrived. Something in you has already sensed it, that this is not the season to keep surviving on old fear and old hesitation. Because God is not asking for perfection anymore, He is asking for movement. And the next step you take is not small in the spirit. It is the door that changes the direction of your entire life. You have been standing at the edge of a decision for longer than most people realize, carrying a burden no one around you could name, hearing a call that felt too deep for ordinary conversation. And even in your exhaustion, there has been a knowing that your delay has not been random. There is a divine tension around your life right now, a sacred urgency, as if the unseen has been waiting for you to finally say yes to what you have been avoiding, and that yes, when it comes, will shake loose what has been stuck for years. What if the reason everything has felt so intense lately is because heaven is no longer waiting for you to understand every detail, only to trust the one who already saw the ending before you ever reached the beginning? The signs have been there, the doors have been closing, the old patterns have been losing their power, and the next move you make will either keep you circling the same mountain or carry you into the life you were always meant to live. And that is why this message finds you now, not by accident, not by coincidence, but because your spirit has reached the point where it can no longer pretend that waiting is the same thing as being prepared. God has been patient with your process, patient with your fear, patient with the parts of you that needed healing, but there comes a time when the waiting season becomes a warning, and the warning is simple: move now, because your obedience is about to unlock everything that has been held back. You were never meant to spend your whole life in the hallway of hesitation. You were never created to keep looking at the door that leads to your destiny and calling it later. There is a sacred impatience rising in your spirit for a reason. It is not restlessness, it is not anxiety. It is the sound of your soul waking up to the truth that God is ready, and He has been ready longer than you think. The only thing that has been standing between you and the next level is the step you keep postponing. And I need you to feel this in your chest, not just hear it with your ears, because this message is not about pressure the way the world uses pressure, twisting your mind, rushing you into fear, forcing you to perform. This is different. This is the kind of holy pressure that comes when grace has already built the bridge, but your feet are still trembling at the edge. This is the moment where your life stops being about what everyone else expects and becomes about whether you will trust the path God placed in front of you, even when it looks too quiet, too unfamiliar, too risky, too lonely. That is what chosen ones go through. Not endless applause, not constant clarity, not a smooth road that makes sense to everybody watching. Chosen ones are often led through seasons where the old life no longer fits, but the new life has not fully opened yet. That in-between space can feel like abandonment if you do not understand the language of divine delay. But divine delay is never divine denial. And the fact that you are still being pulled, still being stirred, still being disturbed by something deeper means the story is not over, it is about to turn. Some of you have been waiting for one perfect sign, one perfect confirmation, one perfect feeling, and God has been speaking through every imperfect thing around you, saying, move anyway. You have outgrown the need for everyone's approval, but the body remembers the old fear, the old conditioning, the old need to be understood before being obedient. And that is why the step ahead of you feels so heavy. Not because it is wrong, because it is real, because it matters, because on the other side of that motion is a version of you that no longer lives in fragments. Maybe that next step is making the call you have been avoiding. Maybe it is leaving the place that has been draining your spirit. Maybe it is saying yes to the work you know was placed inside you before the world taught you to doubt it. Maybe it is finally admitting that what has been keeping you small is not lack, but fear dressed up as caution. Whatever it is, the spirit of this message is clear. There is a moment when waiting becomes resistance, and resistance has a cost. That cost is not just time. It is alignment, momentum, peace, destiny. Chosen ones, there is something almost mysterious about how God works with people like you. He does not always move in the loud way the crowd expects. Sometimes he places a quiet fire in your bones and lets that fire do the speaking. Sometimes he allows the pressure to build until you can no longer remain where you are without feeling the ache of misalignment. And when that ache gets strong enough, it becomes mercy, because it forces you to notice what you would have ignored if life stayed comfortable. A lot of people think change comes with thunder, but sometimes change comes with undies. Sometimes it comes as a holy discomfort you cannot explain. Sometimes it looks like doors shutting, relationships fading, old desires losing their taste, and your spirit becoming more honest than your mind would like. That is how God clears the path. He lets what cannot come with you fall away, and he makes the next step feel impossible to miss. You have been through enough to know that staying where you are is not the same as being safe. Sometimes the place that feels familiar is actually the place that slowly drains your calling. Sometimes the people who say they love you are comfortable with the version of you that never fully rises. Sometimes the life that appears stable is only stable because it asks nothing of your soul. But your soul was not made for shallow survival. Your soul was made for assignment, for impact, for a life that carries a message bigger than your pain. And that is why this season has felt so stripped down. God has been removing the noise so you can hear the instruction. He has been thinning the crowd so you can stop confusing voices with wisdom. He has been letting certain comforts dissolve because comfort can become a cage when destiny is waiting outside. You did not lose those things by accident. Some of them were never meant to stay. Some of them were only meant to reveal what you trust when nothing familiar remains. There is a sacred loneliness that visits the chosen. It is not the loneliness of being unloved. It is the loneliness of being led. People may not understand why you are quieter now, why you are more selective, why some things you used to chase no longer excite you. But that is not emptiness, that is separation. That is the evidence that your spirit is maturing beyond what used to entertain you. When the soul grows, old environments start to feel too small, and old habits start to feel loud. And the silence that once scared you becomes the very place where God begins to shape your next move. And what is this next move? It may not look dramatic from the outside. It may be one honest conversation, one brave decision, one email, one application, one release, one no that protects your future, one yes that scares you because it feels too aligned to be ignored. Do not underestimate the spiritual weight of a simple act of obedience. The kingdom moves through steps, not fantasies. Destiny often opens when fear loses the argument. I need you to understand something deep here. The enemy does not always attack you by destroying everything at once. Sometimes the attack is subtler. It is delay. It is confusion. It is keeping you overthinking what your spirit already knows. It is making you believe that because the step is scary, it must not be right. But the truth is, many of the most sacred movements in your life will feel intimidating at first, because anything that carries real transformation will also challenge the version of you that wanted to remain hidden. The waiting is over in one very specific sense. Not because every answer is here, not because every detail is visible, but because God has already given enough light for the next step, and that is all obedience ever needed. Just enough light to move, just enough trust to respond, just enough faith to cross from delay into alignment. Midway through this message, I want you to do something simple but powerful. Comment one spiritual word that feels alive in your spirit right now, whether it is faith, align, release, or obedience. And if this message is speaking to the hidden part of you that has been waiting for confirmation, like the video and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next for chosen ones who are finally ready to move. Some of you have been praying for clarity when what you really needed was courage. Clarity often comes after motion. That is one of the quiet laws of spiritual growth that no one tells you enough. The road becomes visible as you step, not before. The wisdom comes as you obey, not while you endlessly debate. And the peace you are waiting for is often waiting on the other side of action. You may not feel ready, but readiness is not always a feeling. Sometimes readiness is simply the point where you can no longer ignore the holy pull any longer. Think about how many times your spirit has tried to leave breadcrumbs for you. That recurring thought, that dream that kept returning, that discomfort in your chest when you said yes to things that were too small, that strange grief you felt when you realized your old life was not built for where you are going. Those were not random emotions. They were signals. Heaven was trying to wake you up before your life became a prison made of hesitation. God has been waiting long enough, not because he is impatient, but because he already knows what delayed obedience costs you. Every season you stay frozen in fear, something in your future remains unopened. Every time you keep holding back, the door does not disappear, but your strength to walk through it gets more tired. So this message comes with love, but it also comes with urgency. Stop asking whether the step is worth it. Ask whether your destiny can afford for you to keep stalling. This is where the chosen ones get tested in ways others do not see. You are tested in private before you are trusted in public. You are tested in silence before you are given influence. You are tested in the moments when no one applauds your discipline, no one praises your discipline, and no one even notices that you are choosing differently. That is where the real shift happens. Not in the crowd, not in the spotlight, but in the hidden place where your yes becomes more powerful than your fear. And yes, fear is part of this. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. Fear often appears right before expansion. It arrives like a shadow trying to make a giant decision look like a threat. But fear is not your guide. It is only proof that what lies ahead matters. If it did not matter, you would not feel this resistance. If it did not matter, you would not feel heaven pressing you forward. If it did not matter, your spirit would not be so restless when you try to settle for less. The next step changes everything because it is not only a step in the world, it is a declaration in the spirit. It says, I am no longer available for cycles that keep me numb. It says, I am done negotiating with the version of myself that lives beneath my calling. It says, I trust what God showed me more than I trust what fear keeps whispering. And when a chosen one finally says that with full sincerity, the atmosphere around their life starts to move. What has been delayed begins to loosen. What has been hidden begins to surface. What was blocked begins to flow. What was dead begins to breathe again. Not because you performed perfectly, but because you finally aligned yourself with the timing of heaven. That is how powerful obedience is. It changes the atmosphere before it changes the circumstances. Some of you are standing in front of an answer you already know. You know what needs to end. You know what needs to begin. You know what chapter has expired. You know which habit has been draining you. You know which connection keeps reopening old wounds. You know which dream keeps calling you even though you have been pretending it is too late. It is not too late, but it does require movement, and movement requires honesty. Honesty with yourself, honesty with God, honesty about the cost of staying where your soul no longer belongs. There is a reason you feel so exposed by this message. It is because your spirit recognizes truth before your mind can explain it. Chosen ones do not just hear messages. They feel them. They feel the weight, they feel the correction, they feel the invitation. And when the message is meant for them, it lands like a mirror and a key at the same time. A mirror because it shows you where you have been delaying. A key because it reminds you that the lock was never the problem. The next step was, this is also why isolation has been part of your journey. Not every lonely season is a sign of loss. Sometimes isolation is divine protection. It keeps your attention on the inner work. It prevents you from adopting the opinions that would dilute your calling. It gives you the space to hear what was always there beneath the noise. If people could fully understand what God is shaping in you, they would not be able to stay where they are in the same way. But they do not need to understand it. You do, and that knowing is enough to move. You are not behind, you are being refined. You are not abandoned, you are being positioned. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared for a step that your old self would have been too afraid to take. And yes, the preparation feels uncomfortable because it is not designed to keep you safe forever. It is designed to make sure the future you enter can actually hold the weight of who you are becoming. Some doors only open for the version of you that has stopped begging to be chosen by people who never had the authority to define you. Some breakthroughs only arrive after you stop waiting for permission from the very environment that taught you to doubt yourself. And some blessings are delayed not because God is withholding them, but because He is waiting for you to become the person who will not ruin them with fear, indecision, or self-betrayal. That is not condemnation, that is mercy. So when you feel that inner nudge again, do not rush to explain it away. Do not call it stress when it is direction. Do not call it confusion when it is conviction. Do not call it coincidence when it is destiny tapping your shoulder. There is a reason you keep returning to the same thought, the same possibility, the same quiet knowing. Your spirit has already begun the journey your mind has been trying to delay. Now the two must meet. Now the step must become real. Maybe the next step is painful because it means admitting the old season is gone. Maybe it hurts because it asks you to release a version of yourself that got you through survival but cannot carry you into purpose. Maybe it feels risky because the future cannot be controlled the way fear wants control. But control was never the prize. Freedom was. And freedom begins when you stop treating obedience like a threat and start recognizing it as the path to the life you have been praying for. The moment you move, something shifts. The moment you decide, the fog begins to break. The moment you act, heaven responds. Not always instantly, not always dramatically, but deeply, permanently, in ways that make you realize the delay was never the end of the story. Only the tension before the turning point. So I'm speaking to the part of you that has been tired of almost healing, tired of almost starting, tired of almost trusting, tired of almost trusting, tired of almost becoming. That part of you has carried enough pain, enough pressure, enough silent prayers that went unanswered in the exact way you expected, but were heard in the exact way you needed. God has been waiting long enough for your yes, and your yes may be the very thing that brings the life you thought had passed you by. Keep going with this. Keep moving toward what has been quietly pulling you. Keep honoring the truth, even when it costs your comfort. Keep listening when the stillness gets louder than the crowd, because the next step is not just a step, it is a crossing. It is a decision point in the spirit. It is the place where one act of obedience begins to rewrite what your entire future is made of. And even now, as you hear these words, something in you already knows the choice is in front of you. The question is no longer whether the moment has come. The question is whether you will answer it before fear convinces you to wait one more day, one more week, one more year, one more lifetime of wondering what would have happened if you had trusted God when He was already opening the path beneath your feet. Because this is the part nobody prepares the chosen one for. The moment after the calling becomes undeniable. The moment when excuses lose their power and your spirit can no longer pretend it does not recognize the voice pulling you forward. That moment changes everything, because once you truly see the truth about your life, you cannot unsee it. You cannot return to unconscious living without feeling the weight of your own resistance. And that is why so many of you have felt emotionally exhausted lately. Your soul is tired of carrying a destiny you refuse to step into. You thought the exhaustion came from doing too much. But for many of you, it came from holding yourself back. It came from shrinking your spirit to fit spaces that were already expired. It came from saying yes when your soul meant no. It came from betraying your own inner knowing just to keep temporary peace around you. And temporary peace always becomes inner war when it costs you your alignment. That war is what you have been feeling. There are people around you who still think your battle is external, but the deepest fight has always been internal. The fight between comfort and calling. The fight between familiarity and faith. The fight between who you have been and who God keeps trying to awaken. That is why the pressure intensified the closer you got to this season, because spiritual transformation does not happen through information alone. It happens through confrontation. You are being confronted by your own potential, and potential is heavy when it remains unused. Some of you can feel it late at night, that strange awareness that your life is meant to move differently now. That unsettling realization that you cannot keep repeating the same cycles and expect your spirit to stay asleep. That quiet ache when you imagine what your life could become if fear stopped making your decisions. Those feelings are not random emotional waves. That is your deeper self trying to break through the version of you built from survival. And survival is not the same thing as living. You survived betrayal. You survived rejection. You survived abandonment. You survived seasons where nobody understood your pain. But surviving was never supposed to become your permanent identity. At some point, the chosen one must stop building their entire life around avoiding pain and finally begin building around purpose. That shift is terrifying because purpose demands visibility. The hidden part of you already knows this. You know there is something powerful inside you that has remained buried beneath years of caution, disappointment, and emotional wounds. You know there is a voice inside you that has been silenced too many times. And every time you ignored that voice, something in your spirit dimmed a little more. But the reason this message feels so intense is because heaven is trying to reignite what the world convinced you to suppress. This next step is not just about changing circumstances. It is about recovering yourself. Recovering the confidence fear stole. Recovering the vision disappointment weakened. Recovering the spiritual fire that slowly faded every time you settled for less than what your soul knew was true. And once that fire returns, your entire life begins rearranging itself around a new frequency. People will notice it before you even explain it. You will stop begging for energy that drains you. You will stop chasing validation from people committed to misunderstanding you. You will stop abandoning yourself just to remain accepted in places where your spirit feels suffocated. That is what happens when a chosen one finally moves. Their energy changes first, then their decisions, then their reality. But understand this clearly. The next step will cost something. Every true transformation requires a release. You cannot carry old fear into a new season without eventually collapsing under the contradiction. Some relationships may shift. Some environments may become uncomfortable. Some people may accuse you of changing simply because you stopped betraying yourself to keep them comfortable. Let them misunderstand. The chosen path has never been crowded with people who fully understand the assignment placed on your soul. There is a loneliness that comes with awakening, not because you are unloved, but because your eyes begin seeing beyond illusion. You begin noticing how many people are sleepwalking through lives they secretly resent. You begin noticing how often fear disguises itself as logic. You begin noticing how many souls are starving while pretending to be fulfilled. And once you see it, you cannot unknow it. That awareness changes the way you move. It changes the way you speak. It changes the way you tolerate things. Suddenly, the conversations that once entertained you feel empty. The habits that once distracted you feel exhausting. The environments that once felt normal begin feeling spiritually heavy. This is not you becoming disconnected from life. This is your spirit developing discernment. And discernment always creates separation before it creates elevation. Some of you have been asking God for a breakthrough while secretly clinging to the patterns that block it. You cannot pray for freedom while remaining loyal to fear. You cannot ask for expansion while worshipping comfort. You cannot ask heaven to open new doors while refusing to leave the room you have already outgrown. That contradiction is what has created so much tension in your life lately. Your spirit wants movement, but your fear wants guarantees. And guarantees are the one thing faith never promises. Faith is movement before certainty. Faith is obedience before evidence. Faith is stepping while your knees still shake. And the reason chosen ones are tested so deeply is because your life was never meant to operate on ordinary levels of trust. Your path requires surrender. Real surrender. The kind that changes who you are from the inside out. There is a reason God allowed certain doors to close without explanation. If they had stayed open, you would have stayed asleep inside them. Some losses were actually rescue missions in disguise. Some endings were heaven refusing to let your future die in environments your soul had already outgrown. But because endings hurt, you interpreted the removal as punishment instead of protection. Chosen ones often mistake divine redirection for abandonment at first, because the soul grieves what the spirit already knows must end. And still, despite everything, you kept hearing the call, in quiet moments, in restless nights, in random flashes of clarity that interrupted your distractions. The call never left because your assignment never left. You tried to move on from it, but it kept finding you again. That is how destiny works when it belongs to your soul. It follows you until you either answer it or spend your life running from your own becoming. There are viewers hearing this right now who are standing one decision away from a completely different life. One step away from emotional freedom, one conversation away from healing, one act of courage away from alignment. But fear keeps whispering the same lie. Wait longer. And the dangerous thing about delay is that it feels harmless while slowly stealing years from your spirit. The enemy loves delay because delay drains momentum. Delay weakens confidence. Delay convinces gifted people they missed their timing. Delay turns calling into regret if left unchecked long enough. But hear this clearly, your timing is not dead. Your spirit is waking up now because heaven already accounted for every detour, every wound, every mistake, every season you lost doubting yourself. Nothing is wasted when God is involved. Even your pain has been preparing you. The betrayal taught you discernment. The loneliness taught you self-awareness. The heartbreak taught you depth. The silence taught you how to hear beyond noise. The delays taught you endurance. And now all those lessons are converging into one sacred moment where your soul must decide whether it will continue living beneath its calling or finally rise into what it was shaped for. You are closer than you think. That is why the resistance feels heavier. That is why the pressure intensified. That is why old fears suddenly became louder. Darkness panics when a chosen one is about to stop hesitating. Because once you move in alignment, things begin breaking open spiritually that cannot easily be reversed. Momentum returns, and momentum is powerful. Once the chosen one takes the first real step, the second becomes easier. Then clarity increases, then opportunities appear, then strength returns, not because life suddenly becomes effortless, but because alignment creates energy that fear can never produce. Misalignment drains, alignment activates. That is why your spirit feels more alive, imagining the scary path than remaining trapped in the safe one. You have been taught to fear uncertainty, but uncertainty is often where miracles begin. The disciples had uncertainty before the water parted beneath their faith. The prophets had uncertainty before the vision became reality. The chosen have always walked through seasons where the next step appeared before the full map did. That is not failure. That is the design of spiritual growth. God does not reveal everything at once because complete certainty would remove the need for trust. And trust is what transforms the soul. Anyone can move when the outcome is guaranteed, but chosen ones are shaped through movement in the unknown, through obedience in silence, through courage in seasons where external validation disappears and only inner conviction remains. That is where you are now, at the edge of a deeper version of yourself, at the edge of a life your old identity cannot fully control, at the edge of a decision that future you will look back on and realize it changed everything. Not because the step itself looked dramatic in the moment, but because it marked the day you stopped abandoning your own calling, the day you finally trusted what God had been placing inside you all along. And when that day comes, when you finally move, you're going to realize something that will shake you deeply. The thing you feared was never the step itself. It was the transformation waiting on the other side of it. Because once you become who you were meant to be, you can never comfortably return to who you used to be again. And that is the hidden truth most people never understand about the chosen one. Your greatest battle was never against the world alone. It was against the smaller version of yourself that kept trying to survive in a life your spirit had already outgrown. Every delay, every hesitation, every sleepless night was leading to this exact moment where you finally realized that the door in front of you was never locked by God. It was waiting for your courage, waiting for your trudge, waiting for your movement. So if your spirit feels shaken right now, it is because something ancient inside you is waking up. The part of you that remembers you were not created to live half alive, half awake, constantly shrinking to fit places that cannot hold your destiny. The next step may feel uncertain, but staying where you are has already become unbearable for your soul. That discomfort is not here to destroy you. It is here to push you toward the life heaven has been preparing in silence while you doubted yourself. One day you will look back at this season and realize it was the turning point, the moment fear stopped controlling your future, the moment you stopped waiting for perfect conditions and finally answered the call placed on your life. And when that happens, everything that once felt delayed will suddenly make sense because God was never abandoning you in the waiting. He was preparing you for the step that would change everything forever.